Is love. Just ask the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are feeling the love all night long. Kevin Love showing up and showing out, dropping 40 points, 34 in the first quarter alone. That's the second highest scoring quarter in NBA history. Stephen A., with that, I ask you, can Kevin Love make the Cavs truly a big three?
You know what? I don't think so. Listen, this is no knock against Kevin Love whatsoever. His basketball IQ is off the charts. He's incredibly skilled. He's a big-time player. He's averaging 21 and 10 this season. He's clearly being casted correctly, used correctly by a young, great coach in Tyronn Lue. This is not a knock on Love whatsoever. I've just always viewed Love as a better 1 or 2 option, pretty much primarily a 2 option, as opposed to a 3. I know he can shoot those threes, as evidenced last night when he hit 8 of them in the first quarter. LeBron James had 6 of his 13 assists by feeding Love all on threes. It would have been nice to see LeBron James keep giving it to him so he could have dropped 50, but that's a subject for another day. At the end of the day, Love is a big-time player, somebody that I think has been underappreciated by myself included at times, as well as everybody else. He's a big-time player, but I do think being that third wheel is very, very difficult for him. And even though Tyronn Lue gets him the first touch of every game, make sure he has him more assertive and active because he's getting him the ball on the blocks and he's doing some things. I think against some of the better teams in the league who actually know how to get out on the perimeter and defend perimeter shots, we're not going to see something like this from him. And as a result, even though I don't think it would be as bad offensively, Max, as it was in the finals where he was relatively impotent offensively, but he did make noise defensively and with rebounding in terms of his point production against some of the elite teams that can get out there and defend the perimeter. I think in order for Love to be that big-time dude that we saw in Minnesota, that we're watching averaging 21 and 10 now, I think he'd have to be the secondary offensive option, which obviously he would not be with LeBron and Kyrie there. That's my only trepidation, but it's no knock against him whatsoever because I know the brother can play ball. It's just that when you're that gifted, you're usually not the third option.
The answer is yes, he can be one of a big three by the definition of big three, because a lot of people didn't think Chris Bosh was a big three with LeBron and Wade. And Bosh has never been as good a player as LeBron or Wade have been. I mean, he's just not as good. But he was good enough to be considered one of a big three. And a lot of casual fans were fooled by Bosh because they would say, oh, 8 points, 10 rebounds, or something like 7 rebounds. That's they're not getting their money's worth but Bosh was playing defense. He was doing every single thing the coach asked him to do, stretching it out when they needed to, all those kind of things. He was doing everything that the coach wanted him to do. And so, in fact, he was a huge part of their success, which is why Spoelstra and Riley would say, actually, Bosh is our most indispensable player. And at the time, I was having arguments on the radio and on Sports Nation with people. People were blowing me up on Twitter when I would say Bosh is better than Kevin Love because Kevin Love was putting up 25 and 12. Oh, Bosh, 8 points and 7 rebounds last night. You see that? Yeah, it's the way the coach is using him. So, yes, it's not a question of are they a big three? It's a question of how is Lue going to use Kevin Love? When he's the primary scoring option, he will appear to be a top 5 player to some misguided folks who thought he was. He was never a top 5 player. But he's an all-star caliber player who can shoot the three well for his position, though not as well as he once did because the rest of the league has caught up at that position more, who can post, who can pass the ball, who has a high basketball IQ, as you said, never going to be a good defender, but he knows what he's doing. He can absolutely be part of a big three. And the way they've used him, he's kind of overkill for what the Cavs need, at least offensively for him. He can do everything they need him to do offensively and more. The question as to whether people will catch on that he's part of a big three is if they ask him to do more, because he's capable of doing it. But on a team with LeBron and Kyrie, you don't always need him to do it. This is the issue with basketball. There's only one ball. So statistics of individual players, the kind of counting numbers, points, rebounds, assists, don't always tell you the full story and can mislead fans. Kevin Love is perfectly capable of being one of a big three in Cleveland.
He's capable of it, but again, because of his talents and what it commands, a third option leaves me cause to pause in that regard. And I think his record thus far in Cleveland proves as much in terms of his level of production offensively. Having said all of that, I'd also like to add, I'm not going to get beside myself because there are 30 teams in the NBA, Max Kellerman. Do you know where the Portland Trail Blazers rank defensively? That would be 30. Dead last. And so when I look at it from that perspective, again, I'm not trying to take anything away from Love. He can play the game of basketball, high basketball IQ. He's certainly a big boy that could shoot. I can't stand the fact that he seems to have lost so much weight because when he was in Minnesota, talk about a walking double-double and somebody that just banged. But there's no reason to make that argument now because he's averaging 20 and 10, so he's still finding a way to get things done. I just think that watching Cleveland, as much as I've watched Cleveland, seeing how much LeBron and Kyrie are usually the ones who get it going. When I'm looking at Love going up against elite talent, particularly individuals with size who can get out on the perimeter, what are you going to do then? That's the question mark in terms of a big three. But I'm not trying to knock him in any way because I know the brother can play.
Not in terms of the way their games are, but in terms of their value. Kevin Love is a poor man's Carmelo Anthony in the sense that he is an offensive weapon. If he is your primary scoring option, you're a 500 team. But a 500 team in the West, even when you don't have a great cast around him, this is a damn good player. If he's your secondary scoring option, if he's your second scoring option, I don't think you're going to win a championship. If he's your tertiary, your third option on offense, you're a championship team. But if that's the case, it will not look like he's a very good player. What do you care more about? The results on the court, winning, or the kind of statistical profile and the kind of stuff that makes fans acknowledge how much of a contribution you're making? Again, it's overkill to have him in that position. He's much more than just a quote-unquote stretch four, but his talent enables the Cavs to do things if they want. And I don't think there's a way around considering him a big three. Look, if Carmelo Anthony joins some big, and you love his offense, obviously, Stephen A., his ability to score the ball, but if he joined some team and was not the primary scoring option and they won a title, he might wind up with 17 points a game, something like that. Would that mean he's not part of a big three? Is that just based on, if he is part of that big three, is that just based on his reputation at the time he got traded to that team? The question is not what's the statistical profile. The question is what is the player's actual value and what are they capable of doing? So the answer in Kevin Love is yes. By the standards of big three, you're an all-star caliber player playing with two other guys like that or better. The answer is yes on Kevin Love.
Well, I look at Kevin Love. I have a problem with the comparison to Carmelo Anthony because Kevin Love can't put the ball on the floor like that.
No, right. Carmelo's better. Poor man's. He's a poor man. Not even in terms of their game.
I got it.
Look, if Carmelo Anthony's your primary scoring option, forget about a championship. But if he's a weapon you use, sure, you could win a championship. Same thing with Kevin Love.
All right, guys. So Kevin Love's still on the show on Thanksgiving Eve, but it's Thanksgiving Day, so we need to get back to football.
First Take is presented by Bass Pro Shops. Your adventure starts here.
Let's be honest. When you hear Big Ben Roethlisberger and Andrew Luck are facing off on Turkey Day, you expect an aerial attack. Unfortunately for Colts fans, they won't be seeing their Pro Bowl quarterback when the black and yellow head to Naptown. Luck was ruled out because he didn't practice all week after suffering a concussion on a sack in Sunday's game against Tennessee. Scott Tolzien is expected to get the nod. Stephen Morris has been elevated from the practice squad to back up Tolzien. Both teams are 5-5. Oh, Max Kellerman, with your MVP candidate not playing and Andrew Luck, is this a must-win for the Steelers?
No, it's not. But first, let me say, Andrew Luck's MVP candidacy ain't looking good right now. I was still holding out hope he could get really hot and they could make the playoffs.
You're coming around.
Listen, if he doesn't play in this game, not only does he have less value, but if they win, it looks bad for him. And if they lose, it's going to be that much tougher to make the postseason, to make the playoffs. No, it's not a must-win for the Steelers because they're 5-5, and so are the Ravens. The AFC North is weak right now. And when you look at their schedule, really the difference in their schedule, both fairly typical NFL schedules the rest of the way, but when they play again, it's at home for the Steelers when the Ravens and Steelers play, and the Steelers get the Browns at home. So that really is, even if they lose today, that really is the difference. In more or less evenly matched teams, one team gets the other, the divisional rival with the same record, gets the other at home and gets arguably the worst team in football also at home later in the season. That gives the edge to the Steelers. Even if they lose today, they can still make the playoffs. And so, therefore, by definition, it's not a must-win.
Max, you need prayer. You're totally wrong on this one, and I don't even understand how you can come to the conclusion that you just came to. Let me be very, very clear. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you can't beat Scott Tolzien, I don't even want to talk about you no more. I mean, if they lose to this dude, we might have to talk about them tomorrow because we're going to revisit the results of today's games. But that's about it. I don't want to talk about the Steelers anymore. Now, you can't beat Scott Tolzien? You can't? Him? You got to be kidding me. I didn't want to hear it. That's number one. Number two, we got to pay attention to what's going on with the Steelers here. Since 2014, this is a team that's averaged 32 points per game at home, only 22 on the road. This year alone on the road, 3 points at Philly, 15 points at Miami, only 2 first downs after 3 quarters at Baltimore. And by the way, they're the only offense this season that couldn't put up 2 touchdowns in a game against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they've got to get this thing right. They're the 23rd ranked rushing attack. How is that possible when Le'Veon Bell is your running back? I don't understand what's going on here. I'd like to see more of Sammy Coates. He's been, he hasn't been utilized as extensively as he was early in the season. 2 broken fingers or an index finger. I don't know what reports are out there that are true, but that's what they were saying. So we've got those issues to deal with. But if you're the Steelers, offensively, you're going up against a team in the Indianapolis Colts that ranks dead last against the pass. And on the defensive side of the ball, you're going up against some dude named Scott Tolzien. You got to be kidding me. They better win this game. They better win this game.
As a Steelers fan, you can get emotional and stand on principle. Like, if you can't beat Scott Tolzien, that says bad things about the team. By the way, you're right. It says bad things about them, but you can still make the playoffs. So how is it must win? Because you're not comparing yourself to the Colts. You're really comparing yourselves to the Ravens. And the question is, can you make the playoffs in a division where at the moment you're tied with Baltimore? So what I'm saying is this. The Ravens have an elite defense and a subpar offense. The Steelers have a subpar defense and a good offense. And what you pointed out about where they are running the ball and why aren't they doing more in the passing game actually points to the fact that there's upside there. A great future Hall of Fame quarterback, arguably the best wideout in the league, arguably the best running back in the league, and I would say when he's healthy, he is, if you adjust for things like the offensive line and the run blocking and all that stuff. A very good offensive line in Pittsburgh. There is room for growth there. There's reasonable expectation that the offense can get better. And it's around 12th right now. That's 10th or 12th, so that's like upper third-ish. And it can get even better. It can rise to become elite. I don't think the Ravens can play defense any better than they're playing, and they just don't really have the offensive weapons. So when you look at that and then look at the schedule, whatever you want to say about getting emotional about not being able to beat Scott Tolzien and what that means to you, fact is they can still make the playoffs.
The Steelers have the Indianapolis Colts on the road today. You picking them to beat your Giants next week?
No, I hope not. Let's see what the Giants look like this week.
Okay, that's fine. I thought so. After that, they got road games.
It's an even matchup, though. Steelers-Giants is an even matchup.
Hold on. I gave you a chance to answer the question. You gave me your answer. Don't couch it now. Hold on. Let me get to the other games. We got at Buffalo, at Seattle, then a home game against Baltimore and Cleveland to close out the season. If you can't beat Scott Tolzien and the worst-ranked pass defense in the NFL, why should I believe you're going to win these games?
All right, let me ask you this. The Ravens get the Bengals at home this week. Is that a must-win for them? Because if it's a must-win for them, then this can't also be a must-win for the Steelers. Then they get the Dolphins at home, winners of 5 straight. Then they have to play the Pats on the road. Then they get the Eagles at home. Then they close out with the Steelers on the road and the Bengals on the road. In fact, they have the tougher schedule, not by much, but the difference is they're going to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh also gets the Browns at home. I'm telling you, you can't argue that this is must-win for the Steelers if you also want to argue that it's going to be must-win for the Ravens. Can't be must-win for both because the division's coming down to those two.
Well, first of all, we disagree with that, number one. Number two, and more importantly, I'm looking at it from a talent perspective in this regard. If you can't beat Scott Tolzien, who's also saddled with the worst pass defense in the NFL, what I am simply saying is that I don't have any belief that you'll be able to beat any of those teams to follow on your schedule. I could see Baltimore going back and forth because their defense is their defense, but their offense is somewhat suspect. But what I'm saying about the Steelers is that as suspect as their defense is, everything. Talk about the perfect opponent to have. Pick your poison. Andrew Luck can't play. Scott Tolzien has to fill in. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you've got a defense in Indianapolis that has the worst pass defense, but you've got Antonio Brown and Wheaton and the crew and Jones and everybody and Coates and everybody else. If you can't beat this team tonight, to me, it is an indictment against who everyone thought you were as the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's all I'm saying. Scott Tolzien,
well, that's different than saying must
Scott
win.
Tolzien,
what you're saying is you want to see some. You want to see some evidence that the Steelers are who you hope they could be. A must-win game by almost any definition. I'm not talking about people who say take it
you
literally.
Always make up your definitions. You always want to sit there and say about any definition. Say it's about Max's definition. Max has his own definition of things.
Because I have the best definitions.
I can't reach my dictionary. I wish I could reach my dictionary so I could pick it out.
Here's the next best here's the best definition on this topic. Next topic, I'll give you another best definition. But for this one, I'm not one of those people.
Thank you for admitting it. Thank you for admitting it.
I'm not one of those people who says must win means only when you can be mathematically eliminated. That's ridiculous. You are not to take must win literally. It's a part of language. You use hyperbole to make your point. Must win means if your team, or if this team loses that game, it's over for making the playoffs. You know, for all intents and purposes, it's over. That's not this. That's basically the best working definition of must win I've heard.
That's
Give me
your
a better
definition.
It'd be an embarrassing loss, Max. That's for sure.
My definition,
loss, correct.
My definition is there are pivotal games in a season. There are moments that ultimately define who you are and what you are made of in my mind. That's what I believe. I'm looking at the Steelers' schedule. I'm looking at how the Steelers have looked already. I'm looking at the troubles that they have had. I'm looking at the adversity they have had to overcome. And I'm saying, if you are the Steelers and you lose this particular game to this particular quarterback, to this particular secondary and defense against the pass, to me, I have no faith in you. That's what I'm saying. That's my definition today of what this means in terms of this being a must-win for the Steelers. That's what I believe.
Hang in. I'm sorry. I'm told that we have to reject that definition. It's not good enough. But, you know, thanks for playing.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there.